Part 1. Weird Star Witch. Author, White Silver Black Iron. Chapter 1. Did the wizard lose vital signs after the burning? In Lehman Town, trainee patrolman Rudolph lowered his head and shone the flashlight on the confirmation of burning results, and felt that it was unnecessary to ask this question. He raised his head and let the flashlight shine up and down on the charred corpse. This is no longer a question of death or death, but a question of how well done. After a little thought, Rudolph wrote very objectively, the lower body is well done, the torso is 7/10 done, and the head, 5/10 done. It is confirmed that the wizard has died completely after the burning. Rudolph also wrote a thoughtful little suggestion: it is recommended to hang upside down to burn the wizard upside down next time, and burn it thoroughly. It doesn't matter whether the feet are cooked or not, it is more important to make the head cooked thoroughly. A burst of cold wind blew around, drilling up along Rudolph's trouser legs, making Rudolph a little uneasy. He scribbled in the light of the flashlight, and he wrote faster and faster. The full moon sacrifice in Lehman Town has just ended. The crowd has dispersed and the town square is quiet. Two lonely black shadows stand in the middle of the empty square. The shorter one is the trainee patrolman Rudolph. The taller one is the stake. There is also a wizard who was burned to death on the stake. At this time, he has merged with the stake and cannot be distinguished from it. The prisoner at the stake is very pitiful. Only a charred corpse is left. Rudolph is also pitiful. He has to come to collect the corpse of the prisoner at the stake so late. The smell around is not good. The firewood pile has been burned dry. The smell of ash mixed with the smell of burnt barbecue makes Rudolph feel nauseous. Rudolph endured the discomfort and continued to fill out the confirmation form for the result of the burning. Confirmation of the identity of the person to be executed. He raised his head, and the light of the flashlight intensified the bumps on the face of the charred corpse. The convex part is the charred and cracked skin, and the concave part is the dark mouth and eye sockets. Before the wizard died, he was tortured by the tribunal, which is an institution that specializes in dealing with dangerous elements. They are very professional, but a little too professional. I don't know where the wizard's eyes are. Rudolph has only been here for half a month and is not used to such a creepy scene. Under the moonlight of the full moon and the light of the flashlight, Rudolph hurriedly lowered his head and wrote on the paper, the identity of the person to be executed is correct, and it is confirmed to be the wizard captured in the witch hunt 2 weeks ago. Rudolph will not remember the facial features of this wizard wrongly, because he always appears in Rudolph's nightmares. It was also because of that witch hunt that the original body died, and Rudolph came here and became the current Rudolph. Rudolph searched the memory of the original body and found that the original body was a 17-year-old trainee patrolman with a quirky personality. How quirky is it? The police station, the court, and the witch hunting team of more than 50 people in total. The original body rushed too fast and was the first unlucky person to be killed by the wizard. He didn't even have time to say raise your hands in front of the wizard. It was already late. After quickly filling out the form, Rudolph took out a large sack and put the wizard and the stake together. It was too difficult to take the charred corpse off the stake. Rudolph didn't want to do it so delicately. He picked up the baton and knocked on the dry and crisp stake, preparing to take the stake and the wizard away together. The square was reverberating with crisp bangs, and occasionally a little noise. Maybe one of the legs of the charred corpse was broken, maybe the left leg, or maybe the right leg. Presumably, the dead wizard would not care about these details. The stake and the charred corpse were put into a sack, and then thrown into the carriage by Rudolph. Rudolph drove the horse to the cemetery outside the town. It was too late, and the buildings on both sides of the road were only black silhouettes, slowly retreating. After arriving at the cemetery, Rudolph walked through the tombstones, and his steps were cautious, for fear of waking up some strange things in the cemetery. Dragging the sack all the way, Rudolph could hear the limbs of the charred corpse breaking continuously. Poor wizard. Soon, Rudolph came to the edge of the cemetery, which was close to the wall. Wizards don't deserve to have a good tomb, and it's good to have a horn. What made Rudolph happy was that the gravekeeper had already dug the grave. Rudolph remembered the sheriff's instructions. This sack was a valuable property of the police station. One after another full moon sacrifices had been sent away, and he had to hand the sack back tomorrow. Lifting the sack, whole pieces, fragments, black, and gray were poured into the grave together. After burying the soil, Rudolph breathed a long sigh of relief. If there were no accidents, today's work would be over. Rudolph was folding sacks on the carriage while rushing back. As a particular person, Rudolph would hand in a neatly folded sack. Suddenly, Rudolph was stunned. He felt a hard object as long as a finger in the sack. Could it be that the sack was not emptied cleanly just now? Could this unlucky wizard have left some parts in the sack? After stopping the carriage, Rudolph hurriedly opened the sack, lifted the bottom of the sack, and prepared to pour the wizard's parts on the roadside. A slender object fell out from the bottom of the bag. Rudolph was surprised to find that this finger-shaped object was actually flashing a faint blue light. A wizard is a wizard. His burned parts are so advanced and can glow. Rudolph bent down and took a closer look. The stone in his heart fell to the ground. This did not look like a part of a person, but rather like a stone. When he picked up the stone, he suddenly recognized that it was a star stone related to wizards. Before participating in the witch hunt, the police station organized a training session, during which this type of stone was mentioned. When Rudolph touched the star stone, the world spun. The moon and stars passed by quickly, and Rudolph's back of the head fell to the ground, and it bounced up and down several times. He didn't care about the pain in the back of his head, and rubbed his eyes with his hand. There were double images of the stars in the sky. How could he have astigmatism after falling down? He quickly closed his eyes and prepared to let his eyes relax, but he didn't expect that he saw another starry sky in his mind. The starry sky in his mind had a strong sense of unreality, just like an abstract oil painting. It was more like a star map than a starry sky. The glowing star stone that he just picked up was like a switch, allowing Rudolph to touch something mysterious. Unlike the real starry sky, this star map was so dim, the moon, planets, and stars were all dark gray, and the whole star map seemed to be hidden behind frosted glass. Just when Rudolph didn't understand, the star stone in his hand suddenly disappeared. In the star map in my mind, a bright meteor streaked across the gray starry sky and hit the dim moon hanging in the center of the star map. Then, the moon on the star map was no longer gray, but emitted a soft light like the real moon. Those stars were still dim, which made the moon look so bright. When the meteor hit the moon, a flash of dazzling light burst out around the moon. The starlight slowly fell from the moon and finally floated on the ground of the star map. Rudolph's consciousness approached these starlights and found that they were three small stars floating in the air. In the light of the stars, some phrases can be vaguely distinguished: full moon whispers, moon disaster, night charm. What is this? A golden finger that came from across. Some kind of lottery system? The stars in the sky are all dim. Do they have to light up all the stars? What kind of cattle and horses can complete such a large workload? Rudolph no longer cares about the star map, but looks at the three suspended stars. Night charm. It feels like something for women, not suitable. Moon disaster. It doesn't sound auspicious, so forget it. Full moon whispering. This one seems a little better than the other two. When Rudolph's consciousness touched the floating star representing full moon whispering, his brain suddenly seemed to explode. Blood is so sweet. Break out of the cocoon, my little cuties. Let me out. Countless whispers rushed into Rudolph's ears. Rudolph covered his ears, but it was useless. After a long time, Rudolph got up from the ground. The other whispers had gone far away, leaving only the sentence "let me out" that kept ringing in Rudolph's ears, as if he had tinnitus. Rudolph was very sad. Astigmatism, tinnitus, auditory hallucinations, this night was spent. Weird Star Witch. Author, White Silver Black Iron. Chapter 2. Let me out. Who wants to go out? Where to get out? Where is he going? This gibbering puzzled Rudolph the entire evening. The next day, Rudolph showed up at the sheriff's office with heavy dark circles under his eyes. Sheriff Claude took a look at the burning result confirmation sheet. "Thank you, Rudolph. Did everything go well last night?" Rudolph concealed the matter of the star stone and star map. On the confirmation sheet, he successfully buried the charred corpse of the wizard, and nothing happened after that. In the days when Rudolph first crossed over, he studied everything here crazily. One of the important methods was to read various files in the police station. It has been described in the police station's training and case files. Starstones are special meteorites from the sky that have some connection with wizards. Rudolph knew that there was a little bit of danger here, but he was too curious. As the old saying goes, you come and wear everything. It's really hard not to be exposed to something mysterious and exciting. Rudolph joked, "Sheriff, it would be smoother if you gave me overtime pay." Sheriff Claude touched the delicate beard on his chin to cover up his embarrassment. "Rudolph, I have to tell you again, trainee patrol officers do not get overtime pay." Rudolph shook his head helplessly. When he turned to leave, he saw the duty list on the wall. "Chief, I will be working the night shift for the next week." Sheriff Claude nodded. "No way, we sacrificed too many police officers in the last witch hunt, 2 police officers, 3 patrol officers, 5 trainee patrol officers, my God, what a disaster this is. However, there is good news, isn't there?" The sheriff opened the drawer and took out a palm-sized cardboard box. Rudolph knew the cardboard box with the special bullets in it. "Rudolph, this is my newly made alchemical shotgun, which will make your night shift safer. I hope you can live longer. I received your blessing. Please don't bless me like this next time. I don't need it." Rudolph stepped forward and took the carton. This kind of alchemical shotgun was very expensive. If Rudolph was not afraid of death and sold the alchemical shotgun directly on the black market, he could get at least 3 months' salary back. Sheriff Claude is a level 2 alchemist, and he made this specially for Rudolph. Facing those heretical apostles, such as wizards, giants, plague vectors, etc., ordinary bullets can only injure them in many cases, and only alchemical shotguns can be fatal. When the alchemical shotgun entered Rudolph's bullet belt, Rudolph felt a little more confident when he walked, and he returned to his dormitory. Rudolph is an orphan. Because the elimination rate of trainee patrol officers is very high, Rudolph is lucky enough to become a trainee patrol officer. He has no home in Lehmantown and is alone, so he lives in the dormitory of the police station and is a model employee of the police station. Model employees have a lot of troubles these days. Rudolph's babble always turned Rudolph off when he was struggling on the toilet. Damn, tortured babble about how important toilet time is to men, this precious opportunity to relax. Rudolph always came out of the bathroom with a depressed look on his face. This had attracted the attention of other police officers, and someone began to introduce Rudolph to doctors who could treat hemorrhoids. There's nothing wrong with Rudolph's butt, he doesn't need a hemorrhoid doctor, he just needs a solution to this damn babbling. Starstones, gibberish, star maps that appeared every night. Rudolph looked in the direction of the cemetery, and suddenly had a guess. Could it be related to the one in the cemetery? Rudolph has been waiting until one day it is his turn to patrol the outskirts of the town, and Rudolph can go outside the town openly. When patrolling outside the town at night, Rudolph can apply for a horse, which can increase the efficiency of the patrol. There are also many areas outside the town that require careful attention. The town is not big or small, and Rudolph can only patrol twice a night. As they approached the cemetery for the first time, Rudolph's brows furrowed and his words became clearer and louder. Before executing the plan, Rudolph had to make sure of one more thing. Rudolph sat on the horse and knocked on the window of the cemetery guard room with his baton. "Old Gray, are you interested in the news I asked you to read for me?" Old Gray had lost all his hair. He raised his wrinkled face and looked out the window. When he saw it was Rudolph, he came over and opened the window. A gust of cold wind entered the house, making Old Gray shiver a few times. "I've never seen you like this. Why would anyone want to work in a cemetery?" Old Gray was really puzzled. He didn't know why a young man like Rudolph asked him to ask when the cemetery would recruit new people. "Ha ha," Rudolph said, "who in Lehmantown doesn't know that the tombkeeper in the cemetery earns 12 silver shields a month, while I only have 2 silver shields a month? Silver shields and copper shields are paper currency here, with the royal shield coat of arms painted on them, and can be exchanged for corresponding proportions of silver and copper at banks. It is said that there is also a gold shield, but the denomination is too large and Rudolph has never seen it." Old Gray shook his head and said, "Young man, money is not important. I am the gravekeeper, and no one wants to sit at the table with me in the bar." Rudolph pulled the reins and prepared to leave. "Old Gray, when I get rich, I will definitely say money is not important, especially to people who are poorer than me. By the way," Rudolph suddenly turned around and took out a bottle of liquor from his arms, "I almost forgot, I came to thank you for digging a grave for me. You are such a good man, I hope you will do it again next time." Old Gray was very happy. He took the wine. "It has to be you, Rudolph, you know what I want." When Rudolph handed over the wine, he looked through the window and saw the bed that Old Gray had prepared in the house. It seemed that Old Gray was ready to go to bed. "Good night, Old Gray, I wish you a good dream." After Rudolph finished the first round of inspection, he deliberately sped up the second round. The horse was exhausted and began to pant. It snorted and expressed dissatisfaction with the rider. However, the horse soon relaxed. Rudolph rode on the horse and stood far away from the cemetery. The dark shadows of the pine forest swayed in the cold wind, and no one could find that there was a man and a horse here. Rudolph stared at the cemetery, and the mumbling in his mind was unusually noisy. After 2 attempts, Rudolph was very sure that the cemetery was the source of the muttering. There was no light in Old Gray's classroom, and he had been asleep for more than 2 hours. Rudolph was very patient and was still waiting. Rudolph did not start until there was no sound in the night wind. He tied his horse in the woods, and then walked carefully to the cemetery, making sure to make the least noise. After climbing over the wall, Rudolph followed the location in his memory and came to the wizard's tomb. Rudolph took out his tools, and he bent the shovel surface into a tube shape to make a tube-shaped shovel. He stood at the position of the wizard's head, and the first shovel went down, and the muttering in his mind immediately became much less. This torturous muttering finally had an end. Soon, Rudolph made a vertical hole in the wizard's tomb. 2 tubular objects extended into the vertical hole, one was a gun barrel with alchemical shotgun shells, and the other was a flashlight. Through the vertical hole, Rudolph saw the wizard's head. Although the wizard's head had no eyeballs, only 2 dark eye holes, and there was still dirt in the eye holes, Rudolph still had a feeling that the wizard was staring at him. Rudolph looked at the 2 empty eye sockets. "You are not dead. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment." Weird Star Witch. Author, White Silver Black Iron. Chapter 3. The wizard's head was still charred, partially covered by mud. The mud on his head did not move at all, and he did not respond to Rudolph's question. Rudolph took back the flashlight, and the vertical hole returned to darkness. "The trigger has been moved." There are many ways to solve the mumbling. It is not necessary to follow the mumbling. Eliminating the owner of the mumbling is also a good way. Wait. Young patrolman, a hoarse voice came from the vertical hole. The wizard was so fragile at this time that he had no ability to resist. Let me out. I can save your life. Save me, Rudolph thought for a moment after hearing this, and out of caution, he was ready to listen. You have been contaminated by star power. Don't deny it, you know what I am talking about, the wizard spoke quickly. If you meet an experienced witch hunter or witch tester, you will be exposed immediately. Rudolph frowned. Witch hunters and witch testers are powerful beings in the trial office who specialize in dealing with wizards. Could it be that the moment he picked up the starstone, it was really contaminated? Let me out. I can help you. I can help you become a wizard apprentice. I can also help you avoid the witch examiner. Look, I'm still alive, right? Help me, Rudolph asked doubtfully. You only have a charred head now, how can you help me? The wizard knew that if he didn't say something useful, the patrolman above his head would not believe him. As long as you dig out a slightly fresher corpse, I can recover some strength, and then I can help you. A charred skull can't do anything, and the wizard really needs to recover his body before he can do anything else. Fresh corpse, Rudolph frowned, don't think I don't know anything. I've seen the files of zombies in the police station. A certain level of zombies can replace the limbs of other corpses. From your description, how can you, a wizard, have the ability of zombies? Rudolph obviously didn't believe the wizard's words. He lowered the barrel of the gun, pulled the trigger with his index finger, and prepared to shoot. Wait. Wait, the wizard shouted hurriedly. I think you really don't know anything. Do you know why wizards must die? There are 12 kinds of apostles in this world, and these apostles all possess extraordinary powers. However, no matter what kind of apostle, whether it is an alchemist like your sheriff, or a knight, or a giant, evil god, etc., when they meet a wizard, they will find a way to burn the wizard to death. Because wizards can make other apostles into magic tools, so that they have the abilities of other apostles. If this is the case, then wizards will indeed be targeted by all apostles. Rudolph suddenly thought of a possibility. Can he use magic tools to disguise himself as an alchemist or druid? If he is more careful, can he deceive the witch tester? Or, is there a better way to deal with the witch tester? After a brief thought, he took back the shotgun and picked up the cylindrical shovel again. This shovel went down and directly shoveled up the wizard's charred head. The wizard was obviously relieved, and his stiff facial expression seemed to be much relieved. The torturous whispers beside Rudolph's ears finally disappeared. Wizards, burning at the stake, zombies, witchcraft. Rudolph stared at the head of the wizard in front of him, wondering how the wizard in front of him escaped the terrible means of the Inquisition. There is no Inquisition in Leemantown. It is the Inquisition of Fabreau City that came to Leemantown to arrest people. They are all experienced witch hunters and witch examiners. The wizard's eyeballs were removed by the witch examiner, which shows how careful the witch examiner's examination is. However, this wizard is still alive. No matter how those witch hunters slander us, wizards are the strongest apostles. Don't be afraid, I will help you become a wizard and the strongest apostle. Only the charred head can still speak, which is not the ability of a wizard, but the ability of a zombie in the legend. Rudolph felt that there must be a witchcraft hidden in this charred head. This magic weapon is extremely hidden, so hidden that it can deceive the witch examiner's means. You don't know yet, little patrolman, the apostles are also called immortal apostles, and the most powerful wizards have the same lifespan as the stars, the sun, and the moon. Rudolph stared at the wizard's head, thinking about the location of the magic weapon. He should thank the witch examiner, who has stripped the wizard of his last resistance, so he dared to stand in front of the wizard. You know, A level 2 alchemist like Sheriff Claw didn't dare to face this wizard alone. Be my student. I am a level 3 wizard, Bloody Salem. I believe you must have read my files and know something about what I have done. Rudolph suddenly noticed the few remaining teeth in the wizard's mouth. If there is anything on this head that has not been discovered and is not damaged, it may be. At this time, the wizard also found something unusual, and it seemed that there was something wrong with the patrolman. Rudolph walked to the top of the wizard's head. He used a shovel to hit the wizard's cheek. The effect was very good. This shovel directly smashed the charred flesh on the wizard's cheek. What are you doing? Even if half of the cheek was smashed, it still did not affect the wizard's speech, but his tone had changed. Rudolph was very happy. He heard a little panic in the wizard's voice. He took out an alchemical shotgun shell from his bullet belt. He pulled out the dagger from his waist, pried open the alchemical shotgun shell, and the alchemical lead beads of the shotgun shell were exposed. There were more than a dozen such lead beads, and Rudolph poured one out and placed it in the palm of his hand. The burning feeling made Rudolph feel pain. Rudolph was very depressed. Just like what the wizard said, he had been contaminated by the star power. Just touching the alchemical lead bullet, he felt the burning pain. It was not like this before. In the past, alchemical bullets were just some special bullets for Rudolph and would not have any effect on him. He stretched his hand forward and turned his palm. More than a dozen alchemical lead beads fell and hit the wizard's cheek. A burst of black smoke rose. The bullets made by the alchemist had a strong burning effect on the heretic apostles. What are you going to do? The wizard's voice was only filled with fear, and large and small smoke columns came out of the wizard's face. The smoke columns that fell on other places were very small, only a little bit. But the ones that fell on the wisdom teeth, a lot of smoke came out. The wizard's cheek was burned, and with Rudolph's shovel, his wisdom tooth was exposed. The magic weapon made by this wizard with the zombies was the wisdom tooth. It was indeed hidden enough, and this was how he could deceive the witch examiner. No. 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 Rudolph took out a dagger, inserted it into the root of the wisdom tooth, and prepared to pry up the wisdom tooth of the magic weapon. How dare you? How dare you touch my zombie tooth? Is this magic weapon called the zombie tooth? Rudolph said slowly. Why is my zombie tooth in your mouth? Damn, did you brush your teeth today? When Rudolph pried off the wizard's wisdom tooth, the wizard's head was no longer moving. He picked up the zombie tooth, and from the outside, it was just an ordinary tooth. When he was looking at the zombie tooth, he was suddenly attracted by a beam of light. A crystal that was glittering and glowing slowly floated up on the wizard's head. Rudolph hurriedly grasped the crystal, fearing that the light of the crystal would attract other people. However, like the star stone at the beginning, the wizard crystal also disappeared. He hurriedly closed his eyes, and the star stone appeared in the star map in his mind, rushing into the starry sky like a meteor. Rudolph knew that star field. His constellation in his previous life was Scorpio, so he knew the bright stars of Scorpio. There are 14 bright stars in Scorpio, and these 14 bright stars form the constellation line of Scorpio. Now Rudolph lit up the first star, the Lambda star at the tail of Scorpio. Scorpio, 1/14. Rudolph still had the tooth of the zombie in his hand. He guessed that the tooth of the zombie had been made into a wizard weapon, unlike the wizard crystal, which was a relic that had just been separated after the wizard died, so it could not light up the stars. Just like when the moon was lit up, after the Scorpio Lambda was lit up, 3 floating stars also fell from the bright star. Rudolph's consciousness approached the 3 floating stars and saw the vaguely discernible phrases in the stars: Wizard Apprentice Awakening Ceremony, Word Spirit Recorder Awakening Ceremony, Silver Serpent Tail Awakening Ceremony. Now that I'm here and I'm dressed, I'll just choose one. Weird Star Witch. Author, White Silver Black Iron. Chapter 4. Rudolph carefully put away the teeth of the living corpse. This was a good thing that could survive in the hands of the witch examiner. Rudolph felt that he felt a little safer for an instant. The wizard's head was put into the vertical hole again, and Rudolph buried it carefully. Quickly returning to his horse, Rudolph mounted and left, continuing his inspection. Half an hour later, the gravekeeper Old Gray came to the place where the horse had just been tied. Today's young people don't care about hygiene at all, and they don't even clean up horse manure. Old Gray briefly dealt with the scene before going back to his cabin to sleep. The next day, Rudolph entered Sheriff Crowder's office. Claude heard the sound of the door closing and looked up strangely. Rudolph sat opposite the sheriff, coughed and said, "Sergeant, during the last witch hunt, all the trainee patrol officers I was familiar with died. I have thought about some things and would like to seek your help." Claude put down the document in his hand and looked at Rudolph in front of him with pity. Since Rudolph was seriously injured in the last witch hunt, the young man has been greatly stimulated. "Go on, Rudolph, and I will try my best to satisfy you." Rudolph asked, "Chief, I want to ask how to become an alchemist." "Alchemist?" Claude looked at Rudolph in surprise. "Except for this matter, I can help you with anything." "What about becoming a knight?" "Besides these two things, I can help with anything." "What about becoming a druid?" "Except for these three things, I can help you with anything." Rudolph just looked at the sheriff. As a leader, the sheriff felt a little embarrassed. "Rudolph, please listen to my explanation. I understand your mood. Among the 12 types of apostles, knights, alchemists, and druids are called the three chosen apostles by God. Knights formed the kingdom's aristocratic group, alchemists governed the cities, and druids governed the countryside. If you want to become an alchemist assistant, you need to find 3 alchemists to write letters of recommendation. I can count one of you, and I can also help you find 2 other alchemists. It's free for me, but the signature fees for the other 2 people are 100 gold shields each. A small signing fee is necessary. Alchemists, as the name suggests, need many metals as raw materials for research or weapons. Gold, silver, copper, lead, and of course other rare metals. Alchemists are willing to accept them all, so every alchemist is both a pauper and a rich man. After receiving letters of recommendation from 3 alchemists, the Alchemy Association of Fabreau City will review your application. Alchemists participating in the review meeting need a total attendance fee of 100 gold shields. The deliberation meeting may not necessarily pass, and the problems raised during deliberation may be large or small, and the costs may be large or small. It takes about 200 gold shields to convince the speaker. In short, you need to prepare at least 500 gold shields. Fabreau City only adds about 10 alchemists every year. The Alchemists Association is very cautious in this matter. If you lose 1 gold shield, they will not do anything for you. I really can't help you much with this matter. My salary last month was spent on MRS Claire, and the salary last month was spent on MRS Kara. I really have no money." Rudolph calculated silently in his mind. His current monthly salary of 2 silver shields was 1 gold shield equal to 24 silver shields. He could earn 1 gold shield without eating or drinking for a whole year. 500 gold shields, 500 years, this number is a bit exaggerated. Where's the knight? A knight needs a noble status. Bloodline is nobility. This cannot be solved with money, Sheriff Claude said seriously. "Really, Rudolph, you are now aiming to capture the heart of a noble lady. The probability of your son becoming a knight is countless times higher than the probability of you becoming a knight. Where's the druid?" Druids live in tribes in the wild, and they generally only develop new druids in their own tribes. Claude continued to comfort, "Rudolph, there are some things that you have when you are born. If you don't have them when you are born, you will never have them in your life." "Chief, you are really good at comforting people." Don't comfort me next time. Rudolph stood up and prepared to leave the office. Don't go, I'll enlighten you again. Rudolph said without looking back, I heard that my tooth hurts and I want to go to the dentist. Sheriff Crowder finally said. There are no sacrifices for the full moon ceremony next month. Please pay attention in the past 2 days to see if you can find any clues about the sacrifices. I got it. I'm going to take a leave first and go see the dentist. Knights, alchemists and druids are the chosen apostles of the kingdom and can walk in the sun. The so-called sacrifices are heretical apostles other than the apostles chosen by God. After hearing the consolation from the sergeant, Rudolph made up his mind. He had come and warned all the heretics, no matter what. It would be a pity not to become an apostle. 2 hours later, the door to the Lemontown Dental Clinic opened and closed. Rudolph came out of the dentist holding his cheek. The dentist Mr. Thies bent behind and kept saying apologetic words. Rudolph had a wisdom tooth pulled out, and the pain made him dizzy. I don't know why, but the anesthetic, which should have been sufficient, had much less effect on Rudolph. Sadly, when the result was known, the tooth extraction was already halfway through. Every time the dentist operated, Rudolph spasmed in pain. He tried his best to control his head not to move, but the sweat on his head and clenched fists proved that he persisted very hard. The dentist, who found out that the anesthetic was not used correctly, sweated as much as Rudolph. Because after he applied the anesthetic, he found that the anesthetic would still lose its effect after a while. However, the situation was already like this, and the gums were torn, so it would not be appropriate not to continue. So, the dentist Mr. Thies pretended that the anesthetic was fine and removed Rudolph's wisdom teeth. Looking at Rudolph leaving, Mr. Thies and his assistant said, "Real man. This is a real man." Assistant dentist Miss Abby was twisting a towel at the door. What was twisted off the towel was the sweat that Rudolph had left on the dental chair just now. Real man. It's really Mr. Patrolman. Rudolph couldn't hear the praise from the back, he just frowned and hid his expression under the police hat. He knew why the anesthetic had less effect on him. Just like what the wizard said, he was no longer an ordinary person. The wizard must die, this is the consensus of all the apostles. Rudolph also wanted to be an alchemist, but it was too late now. Among the 3 types of apostles' awakening ceremonies, wizard, word spirit, and silver snake, Rudolph can only choose wizard. He has been contaminated by star power, and the only choice is the best choice. Under the coat is a shirt soaked with sweat. He wants to go back to the police station to change clothes as soon as possible. Rudolph was very depressed, wondering if he could still treat the police station as a place like home in the future. After changing his clothes, Rudolph stood by the window and watched people coming in and out of the police station yard. There are now 2 apostles in the police station in Lemontown. One is Sheriff Claude, the other is Old Police Officer Baby, and the rest are 4 or 5 trainee police officers or trainee patrolmen. No matter what Rudolph is going to do, he needs to wait for Claude and Old Baby to leave the police station. Soon, Old Baby left the police station first and went home. When the sun disappeared from the horizon, Rudolph saw Sheriff Claude also leave the police station by the window. Sheriff Claude wore a formal dress on purpose. It seemed that he was going to visit his lover's house again. This world, like the medieval Europe that Rudolph knew, has a very popular lover culture. It is not terrible for a spouse to find a lover, but it is terrible for a spouse to find a lover while he still has no lover. Rudolph had already taken leave for tooth extraction, so he did not need to patrol tonight and could stay in the police station. When it was late at night, the trainee patrolman on night shift rode away from the police station, and Rudolph left his dormitory. He covered his cheeks and passed by the police station office one by one, borrowing painkillers from everyone he met. He needed to know who else was in the police station. The wizard's awakening ceremony was tonight. Weird Star Witch. Author, White Silver Black Iron. Chapter 5. The basement of the police station is a shooting training room and a temporary prison. The first floor is the service hall and interrogation room. The second floor is the office, conference room, and archive room. The third floor is the dormitory of the police station. Rudolph came to the office area on the second floor. There was no one here. It seemed that everyone was very active after work. It was very late. There was only one female police officer on duty in the service hall on the first floor, Kelida. Kelida was a slightly confused girl. The sheriff rarely let her go on field duty. As long as no one came to report a case, Kelida would secretly go to the duty room next door to sleep. In the temporary cell in the basement, only one trainee patrolman, Sam, was on duty. There were 2 prisoners in the cell now, all of whom committed minor crimes, so they did not need strong guards. 3 patrolmen and 5 trainee patrolmen were sacrificed in the witch hunt. The police station in Lehmantown now has fewer people, and it is the weakest time. There are painkillers in the cell, which are prepared for prisoners who have been beaten. As long as he confessed quickly, he would be given enough painkillers after the beating. Rudolph greeted Sam, got the painkillers, and returned to the third floor, waiting quietly. After 12 o'clock, Rudolph walked up the stairs to the rooftop. In order to facilitate observation of the entire town, the police station was much taller than other houses. There is a rooftop above the 3-story building of the police station. Except for the police station, most houses are 2-story buildings. This also means that the center of the police station rooftop is a blind spot for the entire town. At this time, the starlight shone on the stone floor of the rooftop, and Rudolph took out the star stone. The items taken away by the star map will not disappear, and will automatically appear in Rudolph's hands when needed. He closed his eyes, and his consciousness came to the star map, touching the suspended star representing the Wizard Apprentice Awakening Ceremony. Detailed knowledge about the Wizard Awakening Ceremony was poured into Rudolph's mind. After carefully reviewing the details of the Awakening Ceremony, Rudolph bent down and used the star stone from outer space to draw the star triangle on the stone slab on the rooftop. There are 3 small circles on the 3 corners of the triangle, which are used to attract star power. There is another big circle in the center of the triangle. In the center of the big circle is the constellation symbol of Scorpio. It is November now, the Scorpio month of wizards. Rudolph's natal constellation in his previous life was Scorpio, so he needs to start from Scorpio to enter the ranks of star wizards. Between the small circle and the big circle is a mysterious and meaningless line. Rudolph took off his shoes and socks, stood barefoot on the big circle in the middle, and looked up at Scorpio. He chanted the star wizard spell. Who can explain the twinkling of the stars? Who can catch the flying of meteors? Who can affect the movement of planets? Dominate the stars. Only then can you dominate the world. For a moment, a faint white light appeared on the star triangle. In order to survive, the wizard designed the awakening ceremony to be very quiet, which is why Rudolph dared to complete the ceremony on the roof of the police station. These white lights are the powder of the star stone echoing with the starlight in the sky. Until 1 minute later, all the powder of the star stone was full of starlight. The powder of the star stone, with the starlight, began to gather on Rudolph's body. The entire star triangle was slowly shrinking, like a thin snake that came to life, slowly flowing towards Rudolph. The runes and lines that flashed with glimmers climbed up Rudolph's feet, along Rudolph's skin, climbed up, and drilled into his trouser legs. Rudolph could feel that something had penetrated into his body from his skin, which established a certain connection between him and the starry sky above his head. When the star triangle completely disappeared from Rudolph's feet, the entire rooftop fell into silence. Rudolph. Wizard Apprentice. Natal Astrology, Scorpio, Water Astrology. Astrological Witch Language, Venom. The sun, moon, and planets move on the ecliptic of the celestial sphere. When each person is born, the sun will move in the star field of a certain constellation, and that constellation is his natal constellation. The wizards in this world are also called star wizards. They start by learning the astrological witchcraft of the 12 zodiac constellations. Each constellation has no less than one witchcraft, which is the key to the wizard's spell casting. As a water sign, Scorpio has several witchcrafts, and Rudolph learned venom. The ability that Rudolph can think of now is to poison weapons. The weapons after poisoning, like the alchemy bullets made by the alchemist, can cause fatal damage to other apostles. Ordinary swords and bullets have limited effects on apostles, and only apostles can defeat apostles. Rudolph finally embarked on the path of apostles and entered the world of apostles. The traces left by the star stone on the ground have been completely absorbed by Rudolph, which makes Rudolph feel much more at ease. Rudolph turned around and walked into the stairwell. The moment he stepped into the stairwell, when all the light disappeared, Rudolph took out the wisdom tooth taken from the dead wizard's head. He put the wisdom tooth into his mouth without hesitation. Soon, Rudolph was surprised again. The star map actually knew the zombie tooth. Information about the zombie tooth automatically appeared in Rudolph's mind. Level 3 Zombie Tooth, a wizard weapon made with a level 3 zombie. Ability 1, Corpse Control, controlling the corpse to fight for the zombie. The level of the apostle before death cannot exceed level 3. Ability 2, Organ Replacement, can replace organs and limbs from fresh corpses. Ability 3, Suspended Death, perfect suspended death, no breathing, no heartbeat, no cell activity, extremely difficult to detect. Level 3 Zombie Teeth Side Effects. The body is getting colder and colder. It is recommended not to stay away from people. If you stay alone for a long time, your body will get closer and closer to a corpse. Rudolph was stunned. Don't stay away from people? Can't be alone? This side effect is a bit big. Rudolph was originally ready to run away with a bucket, and he was ready to hide in a corner. Does he have to continue to show up? Then should he continue to be a patrolman? Soon, when Rudolph went downstairs, he felt the stiffness of his body. He couldn't put down his raised legs, and couldn't lift his lowered legs. Although the stiffness was not very strong, it made Rudolph very uncomfortable. He wanted to go to the policewoman Kelida to chat, but Kelida was sleeping soundly. Rudolph had no choice but to leave the police station and wanted to get some fresh air. When he walked on the street, he found that he was not only stiff, but also felt very cold. The side effects of the third-level magic weapon are a bit high. Rudolph thought about what he could do to slow down the side effects of the magic weapon. At this time, most of the shops in Lehman Town have closed. According to Rudolph's memory, only two kinds of shops are still open, taverns and bathhouses. He entered the tavern first, and the people in the tavern were shocked when they saw that he was a patrolman. However, Rudolph only bought a bottle of liquor and left. Of course, the tavern owner Paber gave Rudolph a big discount, which was Rudolph's identity benefit. After leaving the tavern, Rudolph took a sip of liquor and felt his chest warm and comfortable. Rudolph took the wine and came to the bathhouse. Soaking in the warm spring water, Rudolph only showed his head and squinted his eyes. He thought, well, these two methods can effectively alleviate the side effects of the teeth of the zombie. Rudolph was in the pool, paddling in the water, looking at the watch, and every second of comfort was a second. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Weird Star Witch. Author, White Silver Black Iron. Chapter 6. Rudolph, don't leave, let's fish together. Policewoman Kelida is in a good mood these days. Rudolph always chats with her recently, which makes the boring work a little more interesting. Not working during working hours is one of the joys of life. Rudolph also wanted to continue chatting. He needed human contact to resist the side effects of the teeth of the living corpse. However, Rudolph had already seen the big shot coming in at the door of the police station. Mr. Pulley, the Red Priest of Lehman Town, came to the police station. There was only 1 week left before the December full moon sacrifice, but the police station did nothing and the sacrifices were not ready yet. Sheriff Claude respectfully sent the Red Priest Mr. Pulley away. Rudolph followed behind, carefully observing the Red Priest. Every month's full moon ceremony is hosted by Mr. Pulley, the Red Priest. Mr. Pulley is a middle-aged man with a pale, almost colorless face. There are few opportunities to see the Red Priest except during sacrificial rituals. Red Priest Mr. Pulley kept emphasizing the importance of the sacrifice, and Sheriff Claude kept nodding in agreement. After seeing off the Red Priest, Sheriff Claude looked sad. "Rudolph, how are you finding clues about the recent sacrifices?" "I worked very hard and searched day and night, but unfortunately, there are no clues yet." "Day and night," Claude said doubtfully. "I heard that you have been either in the pub or the bathhouse these past few nights. I heard that the owner of bathhouse has hired a nice masseuse in Fabreau City. How do you feel?" Rudolph suddenly became energetic. "This is too much." "And this matter? Why didn't Boss Bass tell me?" "Do you have money?" Sheriff Claude issued a soul torture. "No." Rudolph discovered that the enjoyment of liquor and bathing was real enjoyment, and the money spent was real money. His meager financial resources would soon be at the bottom. Perhaps the base boss knew that Rudolph was tight in his pocket and therefore did not recommend a new service to him. "Well, Rudolph, you and I will go to the wild tomorrow to see if we can find a werewolf. We received a letter from the Druid yesterday. They believe that something bad is happening in the wilderness." Chief Claude said. "If you can successfully find a werewolf, I can give you more funds. Make a deal." The next day, Sheriff Claude and Rudolph left the town of Lehman alone. This is the first time Rudolph has been away from the town since he traveled through time. To ordinary people, the wilderness meant danger and was ruled by various heretical apostles. Claude and Rudolph walked along and encountered the first farm. The closer a farm is to a town, the safer it is because help from the town and police station can be obtained as quickly as possible. Although Chief Claude is not a big or small person in the police station, he is always joking with everyone, but he is still very strong. When the farmer saw the sheriff coming, he hurriedly left the cowshed and went to the roadside. He gave the sheriff and Rudolph a jug of milk each. "Chief Claude, you don't have time to patrol here." While the sheriff was chatting with the farmer, Rudolph observed the two people behind the farmer. This farm is so powerful that it actually employs 2 druids. They were naked from the waist up, their skin tanned by the sun, and their muscles bulging high. There are still drops of sweat dripping down from the strong chest muscles. As the old saying goes, if you exercise too much, you will attract people of the same sex. Rudolph's eyes followed the few drops of sweat, and his direct gaze made the 2 druids turn around. They turned around and made a clanking sound. The druid wears a skirt on his lower body, and the skirt is hung with thick hemp ropes filled with metal pieces, stone pieces, animal teeth, certain bones, etc. In addition to the 2 druids with rough decorations, the 2 huge brown bears following them are also particularly eye-catching. This is the druids, they are the guardians of the wilderness. Places like farms will recruit some druids to protect their farmland, cattle, and sheep. In addition to running their own territories, the druid tribe is also willing to send people to guard these farms in exchange for rewards. Soon, the sheriff and the farmer finished their greetings, and Sheriff Claude also knew some details. "Come on, Rudolph, we need to hurry." Sheriff Claude whipped his riding crop and began to accelerate, and Rudolph quickly followed. They rode horses and galloped on the road, becoming more and more uneasy as they went. There were very few caravans on the road, which was abnormal. Lehman Town is a town on the southern outskirts of Fabreau City. If you want to enter Fabro City from the south, you must pass through Lehman Town. Now there are no caravans encountered on the road, which proves that the caravans discovered something was wrong on the road and changed their plans. This is also the same as what Druid said in the letter he sent to Sheriff Claude. Something very bad is happening in the wilderness. Half a day later, Rudolph came to the most remote farm in Lehman Town. The more remote the farm, the more barren and dangerous it is. On the farm, cattle and sheep were torn apart and left with only their skeletons everywhere. Sheriff Crowder motioned to Rudolph to pick up the shotgun. There might be danger here. These bite marks were left by werewolves. Only a group of werewolves, dominated by the alpha wolf, could defeat the farm's defense so completely. We're late. Sheriff Crowder opened the gate on the farm's wooden fence and entered the farm. There was a fight here. The sheriff stood beside the corpses. Rudolph looked at the corpses on the ground, including the farm hound, the druid's giant bear, and the farm family. The giant bear was dead, with a fatal wound on its throat, black and red flesh and blood, and wounds all over its body. The giant bear's internal organs had been hollowed out and eaten, and it seemed that the werewolves liked the internal organs of animals very much. Rudolph looked around and pointed to a big tree. Sheriff, there is the body of the druid on it. The druids were dressed similarly, with bare upper bodies and skirts covered with decorations. The werewolves and druids are hostile to each other, and they hate each other. After they kill the druids, they will hang the druids high up to show their strength. There are no leaves on the trees in winter, and there are only branches on the big tree. This makes the druid's body very obvious. The druid's blood flowed down the trunk, and the trunk of the big tree turned red, which was very eye-catching. The cold wind blew, causing Rudolph to shiver. Rudolph looked at the druid on the branch of the tree, and was afraid that his identity as a wizard would be exposed one day. He didn't want to associate with heretical apostles like werewolves. Sheriff, what should we do next? Sheriff Claude said, wait, the battle here happened last night. Soon people from the surrounding druid tribes will come, and we will deal with this werewolf attack together with them. Weird Star Witch. Author, White Silver Black Iron. Chapter 7. The farmer's family had been neatly arranged on the ground, and Rudolph covered them with sheets to cover the horrific wounds on their bodies that had been bitten by the werewolf. Some werewolves are very picky eaters and only eat offal. In fact, this farm is quite good. Apart from being a little remote, there is nothing wrong with it. On the contrary, because of its remoteness, the scenery is particularly beautiful. In the distance are low mountains, rivers, and woods. It's a pity that the farmer's family, together with the druid they invited, died at the mouth of the werewolf. A nearby druid tribe called the Elk tribe sent 3 druids, all wearing identical antlers on their heads. Rudolph recalled that in the first farm, the 2 druids had fox furs on their heads. They should be from another tribe. A fire was already lit in the house. Rudolph listened to the conversation between the sheriff and the druid leader while walking around and observing the farmer's house. When he first came to the farm, he was curious about what life on the farm was like. Traveling through time was like a new life. Everything Rudolph saw was interesting. They have comfortable carpets, exquisite glasses, and shiny tableware. This family of 7 must be very warm. Rudolph saw a family portrait on a high table. In the family photo, the family is smiling happily. However, Rudolph suddenly discovered something. He walked to the window and looked at the 7 bodies covered by sheets outside. One of the bodies there was a druid, which meant that the farmer's family was missing one person. Rudolph interrupted the conversation in the room. Sergeant, there is a missing person in this household, a little girl. Rudolph handed the photo frame to the sheriff. The sheriff looked at the photo and said, werewolves will not leave alive, especially a young girl with a fresh taste. The middle-aged druid said, the farmer's family is very pitiful. The rancher has a gun, the farm employs druids, and the werewolf fears death. Traditionally, werewolves would only attack the farm during a full moon. A werewolf under a full moon will go crazy in the moonlight and be able to explode with stronger fighting power. But they came to attack the farm at this time. There is a very bad possibility, that is, there are many werewolves nearby, and the food in the wild can no longer meet their needs. Whether they are werewolves or druid tribes, they all have territorial boundaries. If the number of werewolves increases, the druid tribe will have a headache. This is indeed a very bad possibility. Chief Claude said, "While it's still dark, let's go investigate the surrounding area. If the situation is bad, I will apply for support from the Fabreau City Police Department." The experienced middle-aged druid began to inspect the scene. He searched for any information he could get on the farm. Wolves are social animals, and so are werewolves. Traces of 5 werewolves were found on the ground, and 5 werewolves attacked the farm. The power of the 5 werewolves was overwhelming. The druid guarding the farm was quickly killed, and the other 3 adult males on the farm also died quickly from the werewolves' mouths. The werewolf had a feast. The farm was quickly surveyed, and the middle-aged druid pointed in a direction and chased in that direction. While following the druid to search for werewolves, Rudolph asked, "Sheriff, how can I become a werewolf?" Sheriff Crowder said, "Werewolf saliva is very thick, and among the complex components of saliva, the most terrifying thing is wolfsbane. If unfortunately bitten by a werewolf, most people will be poisoned to death by wolfsbane. If he is even more unlucky and survives being bitten by a werewolf, he will be infected by wolfsbane and become a new werewolf. This kind of apostle awakening ceremony is really rude. Chief, if werewolves are more diligent, can they create many werewolves? There will always be lucky ones. No, I mean there will always be more unlucky people who become werewolves, right? So werewolves are the most dangerous beings in the wilderness." Sheriff Claude warned again, "Rudolph, werewolves have exaggerated recovery capabilities. Their weakness is the wolf head. Only by blowing the werewolf's head or cutting off the werewolf's head can the werewolf be killed." Rudolph nodded. He remembered, blowing the werewolf's head off. Unlike the druids who relied on experience, Rudolph still believed more in tools. Rudolph took out a telescope and looked into the distance with it from time to time. "You are redundant, patrolman, we will not let go of any clues." A young druid stepped forward and looked at Rudolph's telescope with contempt. Rudolph has seen many druids in the past 2 days. The number of druids is far more than that of alchemists. However, these muscular men do not seem to be very smart. Rudolph shook his shotgun. "Do you think this is redundant?" The young druid had great objections to this. Human beings are so humble in front of nature, only nature is powerful. Before the advent of firearms, natural tools such as spears and bows have proven that they can help us live well. Those alchemists who make firearms always think that they have conquered nature. How ridiculous this is! In the end, nature will avenge their arrogance. Nature will prove their insignificance. What he said made sense, but Rudolph didn't want to hear it. He took a few steps away and decided to stay away. The biggest reason why alchemists can form a parliament and wrest a lot of power from the nobles is that they can distribute alchemy bullets to ordinary people, and then give ordinary people the ability to fight against the apostles. Just like the relationship between the chief and several trainee patrol officers in the police station, under the leadership of the chief, the police station also has good combat effectiveness in front of the apostles. Rudolph has speculated in the past few days that alchemists must be extremely resource-consuming, and a city cannot support many alchemists, so the Alchemists Association has to limit the number of alchemists itself. Compared to druids, alchemists are currently the strongest apostles. Soon, the tracking team reached the edge of the forest. After entering the forest, the druids walked in front, and Sheriff Claude walked at the end. Sheriff Claude glanced at Rudolph. Rudolph was the only one who was not an apostle, so he had to be careful. Even the druid, who was extremely familiar with the forest, was cautious at this time, but Rudolph was like a curious baby. Is this mushroom edible? Do you have any mushroom recipes? What if you eat it and hallucinate? What is that leaf you were holding in your mouth just now? Is it refreshing? Can I try it? When you step on the ground with your bare feet, will the tree branches prick your feet? He was seizing the opportunity to learn everything there was to know about the forest, and the young druid was getting tired of asking questions. During a break, Rudolph even climbed the tallest tree. He used binoculars to look far into the forest. The middle-aged druid who was sitting suddenly stood up. No, the animals around are full of fear. At this time, Rudolph was heard shouting from above. Sheriff! Good news! Such good news! What good news? Claude raised his head, not knowing what Rudolph saw. Sheriff! We have all the sacrifices for the next year and a half. Rudolph was very happy. He saw the giant wolf that walked upright, also known as the werewolf. 18 total werewolves. Sheriff! We no longer have to worry about sacrifices. Sheriff Claude's face turned green, and the delicate beard on his chin was trembling. What the hell is this good news? Weird Star Witch. Author, White Silver Black Iron. Chapter 8. The forest was filled with the sound of heavy breathing. 3 druids, Claude and Rudolph, were running wildly in the forest. When did a tribe of 18 werewolves appear around Lehman Town? I don't know, Sheriff. This is the first time we have seen such a large werewolf tribe. There is a leader in a werewolf tribe. For a tribe of less than 10 werewolves, the leader is usually the strongest level 1 werewolf. A tribe of 18 werewolves proves that their leader is at least a level 2 werewolf. Among the 5 people who escaped, only Sheriff Claude was a level 2 apostle, but Sheriff Claude was an alchemist and was not good at close combat. 18 werewolves were enough to pose a very big threat to Sheriff Claude. Escape from the forest first, this was the final decision of the sheriff. In the forest, although the druids had an advantage, they were at a great disadvantage for the sheriff and Rudolph. Both of them mainly used firearms and were not used to fighting in dense pine forests. Rudolph was somewhat relieved that he had followed the others. His physical fitness was a little better than before he became a wizard apprentice. The light in front of him was getting brighter and brighter, proving that they had reached the edge of the forest. Here they come, the middle-aged druid shouted. Following the druid's reminder, Rudolph soon heard the noise around him. Something was running around them quickly. 3 werewolves suddenly jumped out of the bushes and rushed into Rudolph and the other 5. Sheriff Claude drew his gun very quickly, and his revolver fired a gunshot instantly, piercing a werewolf's head with one shot. Blood spurted out from the back of the werewolf's head and fell heavily to the ground. Rudolph saw that the werewolf had slowly changed from a 2-meter-tall giant wolf back to a human appearance. The wolf hair on his body slowly turned into sweat hair, his limbs were getting shorter, his head was getting smaller, and the protruding wolf mouth shrank back, and finally turned into a naked man. The wound on the back of the man's head was not bleeding, but emitting red light as if the bones and scalp were burning. This is the unique ability of alchemical bullets, which can continuously burn around the wound. The other 2 werewolves fell to the ground, separating the druids from the sheriff and Claude. Soon, 7 or 8 werewolves appeared again around. Sheriff Claude shouted to Rudolph, "Open the way." Rudolph had already picked up his double-barreled shotgun. The shotgun has the shortest aiming time, which is suitable for opening the way at this time. Aiming at the 3 werewolves there, Rudolph shot decisively towards the outside of the forest. 2 alchemical shotgun shells were fired, and Rudolph did not seek to hit their heads. Dozens of marbles sprayed forward and directly hit the huge body of the werewolf in front of him. Rudolph knew that he was the weakest, so he rushed to the gap he had just shot. Before he escaped from the encirclement, he looked back and saw that a young druid and his bear had a werewolf hanging on each of them. This wave of attacks by the werewolves was mainly aimed at the druids. Obviously, the werewolves hated the druids even more. Rudolph fled out of the forest without looking back, and Sheriff Claude followed. Rudolph changed bullets for his shotgun while fleeing. The sheriff turned around and kept shooting to help the druid escape. The painful howl of the giant bear came from behind. In contrast, the werewolves did not make much sound. Their hunting was very quiet. The sound of the grass being broken, the sound of something hitting the big tree, the sheriff's continuous gunshots, and the shouts of the young druids proved that the battle behind them was fierce. After Rudolph loaded his shotgun, he kept looking around and found that no werewolves rushed to block him. Sheriff Claude was experienced and had good marksmanship. No werewolf could break through his revolver. Rudolph finally saw the horse tied outside the forest. He didn't have time to untie the reins, so he pulled out the dagger and cut off the part of the rope tied to the tree. He ran over one horse after another and finally freed all the horses. Werewolves are intimidating to all animals, and the horses were in a panic at this time. Rudolph climbed on the horse and finally felt a little safe. He was still the first to rush out and away from the forest. The inexperienced have their own advantages. The inexperienced run first, and I am in my right. Rudolph turned back on his horse and saw Sheriff Claude rushing out and riding his horse to catch up. Then it was the middle-aged druid, and then another druid. After that, there was no more. The druid's bear failed to rush out, and the young druid that Rudolph always asked questions to died in the forest. Rudolph didn't even remember the druid's name now. Run. Go back to the farm first. Hearing the sheriff's order, Rudolph whipped the horse and fled to the farm. The werewolf behind him changed from an upright form to four legs on the ground and began to run wildly behind him. The howling of the leader of the wolves came from behind, and the wolves stopped chasing after a while. They stood on a dirt slope, and their cold wolf eyes watched Rudolph and his group escape from afar. Rudolph looked back at the group of werewolves, and his back felt cold. Werewolves are very patient when hunting. They were targeted by the werewolves, and they would be in danger for a long time. Soon, Rudolph and his group entered the farm. Rudolph, move all the copper you can find to the farm warehouse. There were simple tools in the warehouse. Sheriff Claude did not expect to encounter such a big battle this time, so he needed to replenish weapons and ammunition. Rudolph hurried into the farmer's house and began to search for copper products in the house. Fortunately, Rudolph found 12 copper handles, a bunch of copper keys, 3 copper candlesticks, and a bundle of copper wire. Sheriff Claude was nervous, and he began to use simple tools to make alchemical refined copper. It takes about 5 parts of copper to make 1 part of alchemical refined copper. These refined coppers are coppers containing the burning power of alchemists. Such a high material consumption ratio is also the reason why alchemists consume resources particularly. There are still some bullets in the farmer's arsenal. Sheriff Claude used these bullets as the basis to make a lot of alchemical bullets. Rudolph also found a revolver in the farmer's arsenal. He was eager to give the revolver to Sheriff Claude. Rudolph's meaning was very clear. He also wanted to use the revolver as a weapon. Revolvers are much cooler than shotguns. Just this once, lead bullets are much cheaper than copper bullets. I will mainly give you lead bullets in the future. Rudolph didn't care about what happened in the future. He got 12 golden alchemical bullets. Rudolph loaded 6 bullets into the revolver and another 6 bullets into the loader. Then he left the house with a telescope and went to investigate the werewolves that might appear. The middle-aged druid looked at Rudolph's back and said to Officer Claude, "It's so dangerous now. Is this little patrolman really not afraid of death?" Officer Claude stopped what he was doing and said, "This is what I like about him. I can see the curiosity about the world in his eyes, which is especially obvious these days. Therefore, he is always brave enough to try and is fearless. Although people who die quickly are often like this, I hope he can grow up and survive as soon as possible." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Weird Star Witch. Author, White Silver Black Iron. Chapter 9. It was already late, and Officer Claude was going to stay here for one night before going on the road. With the werewolf's sense of smell and tracking ability, traveling in the middle of the night would be a death wish. This night was not easy. The druids guarded the first floor, and Sheriff Claude and Rudolph guarded the second floor. There were 4 rooms on the second floor, and Rudolph only had to be responsible for one room and the direction outside the window of this room. When the moon rose, Rudolph dared not breathe loudly, his chest tightened, and he was a little nervous. Although he had the teeth of a zombie, he didn't want to exchange an organ from a fresh corpse for the time being, as it sounded too weird. Soon, several pairs of wolf eyes flashed in the distance of the farm. There was some connection between werewolves and the moon, which could make werewolves secrete more hormones, making them crazier and more excited. Dark shadows appeared in the distance, as the werewolves crawled forward, their shoulder blades rolling in the dark. Soon, the werewolves got into the fence and began to approach the farmhouse. The sound of metal collision broke the silence. It was the druid's trap that worked. Druid was very good at these outdoor traps. The whimpering of the werewolf came in the night. The bow and arrow shot out from the window on the first floor and accurately hit the werewolf caught in the trap. The trap trapped the werewolf, and the bow and arrow hit the werewolf's vitals. Druid was very skilled in handling these things. Rudolph's eyesight was not as good as Druid's, so he couldn't see the situation in the distance carefully. He stretched out his revolver from the window and waited for the werewolf to rush to the nearby area. A black shadow rushed towards the house quickly, and Rudolph moved his arm hurriedly, trying to keep up with the werewolf. He fired 2 bullets, but only hit the werewolf's legs. With the werewolf's recovery ability, the werewolf will soon be alive and kicking. Rudolph then knew why the police station equipped their trainee patrolmen with shotguns. With his current strength, even if he was given a revolver, he couldn't hit the target. On the contrary, the rough and hard shotgun is more suitable for ordinary people. It is said that the army is mainly based on rifles. Alchemists believe that different numbers of people and different occasions are suitable for different firearms. Even though he knew that he was not suitable for revolvers now, Rudolph still couldn't give up the revolver. He couldn't always hold the bulky shotgun. The revolver is more flexible. For men, posture is also very important. Rudolph heard the sheriff firing intensively at the other end of the second floor. In less than 8 seconds, the sheriff finished 2 magazines and fired 12 bullets. Compared with Rudolph, who had no achievements, the sheriff must have achieved a lot. Rudolph left the window and came to the door of the room, staring at the staircase outside the door. At this time, a fierce fight had already taken place on the first floor, and the druid had already fought with the werewolf. Rudolph's eyes were fixed on the staircase. When the werewolf popped up on the stairs, Rudolph would immediately give the werewolf a bullet. Just when Rudolph was extremely nervous, a loud noise suddenly exploded behind him. Rudolph only had time to turn his head slightly, and saw the wooden floor of the room exploded in the air. Some pieces of the wooden floor even hit Rudolph's back. A werewolf covered with stiff hair jumped out of the wooden floor. And this is a level 2 werewolf. This werewolf is obviously a circle larger than other werewolves, and its height reaches more than 2 meters when it stands upright. The faint light coming in from the window was blocked by the werewolf, and Rudolph was completely in the shadow. Seeing the werewolf up close at this time, Rudolph found that the werewolf's head circumference was disproportionately large. However, the werewolf's movements were obviously much faster than Rudolph's. The werewolf's smelly mouth was almost close to Rudolph's face, and Rudolph's revolver was just halfway raised at this time. At this moment, a rough gunshot suddenly rang out in the room. It's not a revolver. Rudolph had watched the druids make traps, so he followed the druids and made a simple mechanism with a shotgun by the window. The mechanism was triggered, and the shotgun fired at the werewolf's back. The werewolf let out a howl, and more than a dozen alchemical lead bullets hit the werewolf's back. Rudolph's combat experience: don't easily enter the enemy's preset battlefield. Because of the pain, the werewolf straightened up and bent backwards. Rudolph saw the werewolf's forelimbs instinctively stretch to its back. At this time, Rudolph did not retreat but advanced, a sliding tackle. He did not want to attack the level 2 werewolf, but wanted to escape. He used the fastest speed to drill into the hole that the werewolf had just broken in the floor. When falling, Rudolph saw the burning holes left by the shotgun on the werewolf's back, and also saw that the flesh on the werewolf's back was repairing the holes at a speed visible to the naked eye. Lead bullets were squeezed out by the werewolf's muscles, and the wounds began to heal quickly after the lead bullets disappeared. It was terrible. This was the battlefield of adults, and Rudolph ran first to show respect. Sure enough, when Rudolph fell on the first floor, gunshots were heard on the second floor. It was Sheriff Claude fighting with the werewolves. It can't be said that Rudolph was useless, but it can only be said that he was not very useful. At least he reminded the sheriff that a werewolf had broken through to the second floor. When Rudolph fell to the first floor, he ignored the pain in his back, squatted quickly, and then raised his gun to shoot. There were dead werewolves on the ground, some in werewolf form, and some in human form. It depends on whether the werewolf remembered that he was once a human at the moment of death, whether the animal nature completely overwhelmed the human nature, or whether there was a little human nature left. At this time, the druids were clearly at a disadvantage. Even though several werewolves were killed in the charge just now, they still had a considerable advantage over the druids. At this time, the wooden partitions of the house had been almost destroyed by werewolves and druids, so Rudolph's shooting was not much blocked. Knowing that there were no level 2 werewolves here, Rudolph was no longer panicked. While the werewolf's attention was not on Rudolph, he calmly pulled the trigger. The first bullet hit a werewolf's dog head steadily. The werewolf was instantly sluggish and slowly turned back into a human. Rudolph still had time to observe his results. There was a sizzling burning sound coming from the hole left by the bullet. There was a big naked man lying in that place. The movies are all lies. After the monsters have finished transforming, they have no clothes on their bodies. At this time, several pairs of wolf eyes stared at Rudolph, and in an instant, Rudolph's hair stood on end. There is no emotion in the eyes of the beasts. They think it is natural to cut open the soft belly of the prey. This cold look will scare the prey, such as Rudolph now. Rudolph admitted that he was somewhat immoral and felt guilty about looking at naked bodies, but such a look was too scary. He fired several shots in a panic, and only one shot hit the werewolf, knocking it down, but it did not hit the head, so it was not fatal. The other 2 werewolves had already rushed towards Rudolph. At such a close distance, Rudolph missed his shotgun very much. But, unfortunately, he only had a revolver, and escape. After the 6 bullets were used up, Rudolph fled backwards in panic and jumped out of the window. His posture was good, but the glass fragments fell outside with him, and he was worried that the glass fragments would pierce him. When he fell to the ground, he slid a distance on the ground. What you worry about will come true. It was at this distance that a piece of glass pierced his waist. Damn. Will scars on his body affect his promotion to patrolman? I heard that the police station's promotion review is very strict. No tattoos or scars on the body. Weird Star Witch. Author, White Silver Black Iron. Chapter 10. When Rudolph rushed out of the window, 3 werewolves also jumped out of the window one after another. The werewolves were in much better shape than Rudolph, so they easily jumped over Rudolph from the air and blocked his escape. The werewolves stared at Rudolph and saw that Rudolph's hands were pushing glass shards on the ground. Rudolph was not afraid of glass shards, but when he just landed, the sound of landing was wrong, and the place where he fell was empty. This might be a cellar. Before the werewolves pounced on him, Rudolph finally touched the handle of the cellar. He opened the cover of the cellar and quickly got in. The werewolves were agile, and Rudolph could not be the opponent of the werewolves outdoors or under siege. Only in narrow places could his revolver play a role. And the cover of the cellar that he opened was torn into pieces by the wolf's claws. The wolf's claws were much stronger than Rudolph imagined. Rudolph managed to fall into the cellar at the critical moment. This night, he fell all the time. First he fell from the second floor, and now he fell from the ground to the cellar. Rudolph threw out the magazine of the revolver in the dark, and loaded the revolver with bullets using the loader in the dark. The sound of the empty shell hitting the ground was very crisp, echoing in the cellar. The cellar was not big, and he rushed to the end of the cellar in just 5 steps. Leaning against the damp and cold wall of the cellar, Rudolph panted heavily. The werewolves had not come in yet, and Rudolph guessed that the werewolves were also hesitant. Rudolph had alchemical bullets, and the werewolves were afraid of death. The moonlight shone directly through the entrance of the cellar. As the time in the dark increased, Rudolph's eyes slowly adapted to the darkness. A chill came from the throat. In the darkness, a dagger was against Rudolph's throat. Rudolph was so focused on the entrance to the cellar that he didn't notice that there was someone beside him. "Slow down. It's cold." "The knife is too cold." Rudolph could feel the vibration of his throat and the friction of the dagger when he spoke. "There are werewolves outside." "Have you seen werewolves? They are very scary and can bite people to death." He saw from the corner of his eye that the person holding the dagger was a girl with shaved hair. Hearing the word werewolf, the dagger was at least 3 millimeters away from Rudolph's throat. Rudolph knew that he was right. Only the common danger could keep him away from this inexplicable accident. Werewolves are terrible beasts. They can bite anyone's head to pieces with one bite. They also have sharp claws. One claw can smash anyone's leg bones. Werewolves are damn beasts. Rudolph was stunned. He wanted to take back what he had just said because the little girl next to him suddenly began to change. Her hair turned into wolf mane, her facial features protruded forward, turning into the appearance of a wolf, and her slender limbs became as hard as a sickle in an instant. Unlike the werewolves that Rudolph had seen, the werewolf next to him seemed to have white hair. White wolf. The dagger fell to the ground, but the cellar was narrow, and the hot air exhaled from the white wolf's nostrils and mouth almost sprayed on Rudolph's face. "My description is not very accurate. I apologize to you. Werewolves are not all bad people. I think the white wolf is pretty good. Look at your fur color." The more Rudolph explained, the more embarrassed he became. It was okay to hide a person in the cellar, but why was there a werewolf? At this moment, a werewolf jumped down from the cellar. The white wolf turned around and completely abandoned Rudolph. What kind of roar was that? The white wolf's howl was very sharp and piercing. In an instant, the two werewolves pounced on each other. The white werewolf was still very small, similar to an ordinary wild wolf. This white wolf was just a wolf servant, not yet a level 1 werewolf. Just like Rudolph was only a wizard apprentice, not yet a level 1 wizard, and his ability was very weak. The level 1 werewolf on the opposite side was obviously a circle larger. A wolf servant versus a level 1 werewolf, the difference between the two was extremely obvious. The situation was very easy to judge. The enemy of the enemy was a friend, since the white wolf was targeting the werewolf, then helping the white wolf was helping himself. However, the battle between the white wolf and the level 1 werewolf was very fierce, and the cellar was too narrow, so Rudolph could not find a suitable opportunity at all. The power gap between the two sides was also very large. The level 1 werewolf slapped the white wolf on the side wall with one claw, and then opened his mouth and bit the white wolf's throat. Blood came out of the white wolf's throat, and Rudolph even heard a sound similar to water flow. Even so, the white wolf stretched out his limbs and hugged the level 1 werewolf in front of him tightly. Rudolph's gunshot sounded at the right time, and an alchemical bullet passed through the head of the level 1 werewolf. A terrible wound appeared on the werewolf's head. Where the bullet passed, a burning red light was emitted. The werewolf wailed in pain, and finally opened his bloody mouth to bite the white wolf's neck. And the white wolf bit back at the throat of the level 1 werewolf like crazy. Rudolph saw a strange scene. The white wolf was swallowing the blood in the throat of the level 1 werewolf. The blood entered the throat of the white wolf and seemed to expand the body of the white wolf. The whole body of the white wolf was expanding, the bones were growing, the muscles were bulging, and the body was getting bigger and bigger. The white wolf was changing from a wolf servant to a level 1 werewolf. The promotion of the werewolf is so simple. Biting off the throat of the high-level werewolf and drinking the blood of the high-level werewolf can achieve the promotion of level. The whimpering sound from the level 1 werewolf's mouth became smaller and smaller, and soon he died. At this time, the white wolf had grown to a height of 1 person. Rudolph saw that the wound on the white wolf's throat was recovering quickly, which was the apostle ability of the werewolf. The white wolf was shaking, not knowing whether it was because of the promotion or the previous injury. She staggered to the end of the cellar, and it seemed that sticking to the wall at the end would make her feel more secure. She slowly lay down at Rudolph's feet. Her white hair shrank, and her body shape slowly changed, turning back into a girl. This little girl might be 1 or 2 years younger than Rudolph. The movies are all lies. Really, isn't this a test for Rudolph? Which man can withstand such a test? Another werewolf jumped into the cellar and scared Rudolph awake. Rudolph thought that he had to deal with this werewolf as soon as possible, otherwise the wolf girl would lie naked on the ground and catch a cold. Rudolph just raised his gun and saw another werewolf jumping into the cellar. What a waste of time, my brother is very busy now, why are you so blind?